Okay, I'm really worried about the crick in the neck. Okay, you're good. All right, so we've got a presentation for you here today, and it does include quite a bit of talking, probably about 45 to 50 minutes, but it is a lecture. So if
that reminds me, can I interrupt you for just a moment to say to the people that are here for the first time, we said this the first week.
Yeah.
We need to say it again.
I'm going to say it.
That this isn't going to be what it's going to be.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Yeah. My next statement is we don't normally do this. We are not a teaching and lecturing group except for during these 3 orientation weeks. So once beyond this, we are very hands-on in our approach. We gather, we talked about this last week, what our routine is, but we gather, we share dreams, we work some of the dreams that we've selected, and we break into small groups, and you'll learn that routine as we go along, just as we do it. So also last week, you heard about our opening and closing circles and how we break into the small groups, and we use a projective process in group Dreamwork here, the In My Dream process. So let's move on. If you're new to Dreamwork, we know you'll soon be right in here with us, getting comfortable with the language of symbol and image and relating to your dreams in meaningful ways. Can you see? Now can you see? Okay. Okay. So yes, you'll soon be comfortable with this language of symbol and image and relating to your dreams. To help with this, we need to build from a common foundation, to start with some common assumptions. So that's what I will attempt to give you here. I'll introduce some Jungian basics to give you an overview of the framework we use here to develop a dialogue with our dreams. And if this material is new to you, don't worry about taking it all in all at once. We will be continuing this discussion during our study days this year. We're going to be using a wonderful book called The Way of the Dream, Conversations on Jungian Dream Interpretation with Marie-Louise von Franz, who happened to be an associate of Carl Jung's for almost 30 years. But as you come to Dream Group, you are almost certain to pick up on the core concepts as you attend our meetings, participate in the study days, and read on your own. It can seem overwhelming when first taking all of this in, so I would encourage you to just relax and take in what sticks here today, or just sit back and enjoy the images. Just let it flow over you. And this beautiful Betty Buchor painting of flow. So, what is it exactly that we are doing here? Why look at our dreams? Is it just for fun, a curiosity, or is it something deeper? Do dreams contain clues for a more soulful life that we are missing? Ultimately, each of you will answer the question of why dreams in your own way. Here in the Frankfurt Dream Group, we have learned to listen closely to our dreams, to honor them, and to learn from them. We have found that dreams can help us uncover the real, the true, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly, and all the other astonishing energies that live and roil inside us. Dreams lead us through a gradual letting go of all that holds us back, teaching us a pattern of renewal that can create a more abundant life. So to put us in a Jungian frame of mind, I'm going to employ for a moment the language of symbol, because that's the native tongue of dreams. And I always like to do here at the opening of the talk, I like to turn to the symbolism of the seasons because it is easy to notice and ponder. So here we are in mid-January, and we find ourselves in the heart of winter. Summer has a very outward focus. It's a very social time. We are often out of doors, gardening, vacationing, and visiting. But as autumn moves in and turns to winter, there's a noticeable turn toward a more inward focus. With these shortened days and longer nights, we likely sleep more. So we're spending more time in the world of dreams as we undergo our annual cycle of rest and renewal. As the earth goes dormant, there is also a dormancy of sorts in ourselves, or at least the need to slow down. We are drawn toward introspection, just as we might be drawn indoors to sit by the fire, read our books, or cuddle up and binge watch Netflix. But if we align with this quieter time and use it as a time of reflection, we may discover places inside us that have frozen over or been covered with litter like dead leaves on the winter forest floor. Dreamwork is in large part about going within, digging out and taking account of our dark or unknown interior spaces, and perhaps to move toward an eventual thaw. As we'll see, Dreamwork gets us very actively involved with what we could call an inner inventory by helping to uncover previously unconscious motivations, fears, and other shadow parts of ourselves. But Dreamwork should not only be seen as a dark and dreary affair. It is also about engaging with the mystery and meaning within the natural flow of life itself, about listening to it, learning from it, and being transformed by it. Dreamwork is spiritual work, for it takes us on a journey that puts us in touch with our deepest interiority, with the true self humming within us. Through this work, we can find a way to approach that deepest self and to begin to unify all of our interior parts as we move toward healing and wholeness in our lives. Dreams are, I believe, a primary way that the mystery of being approaches us. Many, if not most, spiritual traditions have acknowledged the dream's great importance. The ancient Hebrews, the Tibetan Buddhists, the early Christians, the Taoists, the Sufis, the traditions of shamanism, and many others have honored and been led by dreams. Accounts of life-changing dreams and visions are scattered throughout many sacred texts. They are found in abundance in the Judeo-Christian tradition of our culture. In fact, one of the Hebrew names for God can be translated as meaning dream state. And the ancients often spoke of somnia adeo, which means dreams sent from God. But we might wonder what has happened to the traditions of attending to dreams in our collective world today. Where did this practice of listening to our dreams and looking for meaning within the natural flow of our daily lives go? In large part, what happened is that as the Western world moved through the age of enlightenment, only those things that could be known through the senses came to be considered real or rational. So those things deemed non-rational, such as dreams, visions, and synchronicities, began to be devalued and repressed. They fell out of favor. The modern mind could no longer give credence to such things unseen, which could not be rationally or scientifically explained. And yet, this mystery of being that our ancestors once experienced so readily in the daily unfolding of their lives must have taken up residence somewhere. Certainly, many of us still seek and find this mystery at work in the world today. We find it in the peace of wild things, as Wendell Berry speaks of it, in the grand and intricate beauty of the natural world. We may find it in silence or prayer or meditation. We experience it in artistic expression, in human connection, in worship, and in meaningful work, in any sacred moment where we can be fully present and attuned to that moment's gift. But our attention is often fleeting, and it is clear that our culture does not support such deep attention. We lack a collective understanding of this source of wisdom woven into the fabric of all life, and that would be wisdom with a capital W. Wisdom as the intelligence that penetrates the flow of life, which is sometimes called Sophia. This wisdom is an ever-present force that can instruct, correct, enliven, and call us to a larger life than our little selves could have imagined. The practice of dream work has served as a way to fulfill my own longing for a fuller experience of wisdom. When we consider this active force coming from the source in whom we live and move and have our being, whose presence is so near, when we consider the wisdom woven into the very fabric of our lives and the possibility that it is still speaking to us through our nightly dreams and through the meaningful coincidences of our waking lives, we have to wonder how we might relate to this as modern people. How, we might ask, can our often crazy and indecipherable dreams have anything of value to teach us? How can we know that this is a voice for wisdom? As the dreams approach us, our problem becomes, how do we approach the dreams? A very good answer can be found in looking at depth psychology and the work of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. Depth psychology, I believe, is one of the great gifts of the 20th century because it offers modern people a way to recognize and relate to the powerful unconscious forces that pervade our personal and our collective lives. It gives us a way to bring these unconscious forces to the light of consciousness where they can be looked at, honored, and integrated. Carl Jung in the early 20th century, working with the new science of psychology and using scientific methods of inquiry, developed a model of the psyche that accounts for a wise and organizing center, an autonomous reality within our deep unconscious. We might call that the divine spark or the ground of being. Jung termed this autonomous organizing center the self with a capital S. This self, as Jung called it, is that place within where we experience the mystery of being. Or in religious terms, we could say that the experience of the self is the experience of God. It is the part within us that knows about God. So I should probably also point out here that this self-centered deep within our unconscious is not the same as our ego self. The ego self, the small s self, what we think of as our inner me, is in Jung's model the organizing center of our conscious lives. Everything above the blue line is consciousness. And then the capital S self is the organizing center of our unconscious lives. Everything below that line of consciousness to unconsciousness. There are many ways to attempt to depict this model, and this is just one of them. But we want to back up here a bit because we need to cover some of the basic concepts of Jungian psychology that are necessary for a fuller understanding. And two of the most basic are of consciousness and the unconscious. So, consciousness is everything we see, perceive, feel, and understand. It is said to be the realm of the mind, although it does include our body consciousness too. For each of us, it is what we know, and for each of us, it is different. It is often symbolized by light and by the sun, and is considered symbolically masculine. Consciousness is hard work. It makes us tired. Generally, we can only do it for about 16 hours at a stretch before sinking back into unconsciousness. Creatures with less capacity for consciousness than we adult humans have, like our dogs and cats and baby humans, they can't go for anywhere near 16 hours because, like I said, it's hard work. We have very little consciousness when we are born, but it builds up gradually during childhood. First coming as little islands of awareness, which may stay with us as disconnected memories. Then at some point, usually around age 5, we begin to have continuous memory because our consciousness has become solid enough to build upon itself continually. We can also say that consciousness is limited. It can only handle so much at one time. And so now we're going to do our little experiment to show that. So what I would like for you to do is stop and focus on your consciousness right at this moment. Just whatever is in your awareness right now, like I'm sitting in this chair in the light clinic, or my shoulder itches, or what did I forget to do at home, or how much is it going to rain this weekend? Okay, got it? Now, I would like for you to think about what you were doing when you got out of bed this morning, if you can remember. Now, slowly, I want you to, as you do this, as you try to call up in your mind the memory of what you were doing earlier today, pay attention to how your consciousness had to shift away from the here and now in order to do that. You couldn't really be entirely conscious of both things at once, maybe just a little bit. But your consciousness of each situation was probably diminished by the competing claims for the spotlight. So we say consciousness is limited, but it is very important. It is the dry land beneath our feet as we live our lives, our foundation, our terra firma. We can say that the more consciousness we have, the more fully human we become. And as I just mentioned, the center of consciousness is the ego. So the ego doesn't often get a lot of respect, and there's frequent talk of the need to be rid of it or to tame it. And it is certainly true that over-identifying with our egos can lead to all kinds of bad behaviors. But here in this work, it is important to understand that we do need a strong ego container in order to keep our consciousness ordered and intact. The ego serves a very important organizing function. Without a strong enough ego, we can be overtaken by unconscious forces or even be vulnerable to psychotic breaks and such. As we begin to work with our dreams, there is no doubt that our ego attitudes will be brought under scrutiny and altered as we come to better understand our hidden motivations and shadow selves. But at the beginning of this type of inner work, it is important to have a strong and healthy ego. And I just like to think that, I think about the ego as like it's more bogus than bad. It just pretends that it's more than it is. So, that's fine. Now let's turn our attention to the, oh, and there's my ego slide that I forgot to click. So that's just showing how we need a unified, balanced, and stable ego. We spend the first half of our life developing the strong container, and the second half, as Jung says, is about going within and letting go of it. Okay. So, turning toward the unconscious. As much as our ego selves would like to think that consciousness is all there is of reality, the fact is that consciousness is just a little island in the vast, endless sea of the unconscious. Or consciousness is like the tip of an iceberg of infinite size. The unconscious is everything that is not conscious, everything that is unknown, not only in the present, but also in the past and in the future. The unconscious is thought of as being below us, or around us, or inside us, unseen, unknown, and hidden, but always interacting with us. It is not nothing. It is, in fact, very alive. Carl Jung had this to say about the unconscious. The unconscious is the deposit of all human experience right back to its remotest beginnings, not indeed a dead deposit, a sort of abandoned rubbish heap, but a living system of reactions and aptitudes that determine the individual's life in invisible ways, all the more effective because invisible. As I just mentioned, the unconscious also has a center, which Jung calls the self, again the capital S self. It is often symbolized by circular or mandala forms, such as this crossed circle found in Jung's Red Book. The self coordinates our many parts, as well as the many parts of life itself. The self is that deep inner guiding force that directs our journey in an unseen way. It is the voice for wisdom that teaches us, guides us, and heals us. The unconscious belongs to the realm of nature, a part of life, and symbolically feminine. It is often symbolized in our dreams as water, or forest and wilderness, or underground places. The unconscious has three important attributes. It is autonomous. We do not have control over it. It relates to us on its own for good or ill. In fact, it can mess with us from time to time, which is why we need that strong ego for balance and discernment. The unconscious seeks dialogue with us. Its attempt to communicate with us never lets up. It is up to us to become aware of it. And the unconscious is compensatory. It seeks dialogue in order to balance and expand our consciousness. It doesn't try to tell us what we already know, but rather tries to fill in our gaps in consciousness, to show us our blind spots. This compensatory function of the unconscious seeks to give us a balanced and whole picture of our lives in which to operate. And here is Joyce's nice diagram. You can see here, I like this one because you can note that Jung actually divided the unconscious into personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, but we're not going to really get into that much today. But the thing I like about this is that it shows you how, let's see, we have we're all these individual bubbles bobbing in the sea of unconsciousness. And as we do effective dream work and we work to bring more of this material down here up into consciousness, we see a progression of we may start out here and I may end up here with more consciousness above the surface. So that's just a nice graphic of that. So all of this sounds pretty good, right? Becoming more conscious. So why then is it that we are not more tuned into this dialogue than we are, especially when considering that it's a helpful, healing voice within that is trying to speak to us? Well, probably the main reason that we resist tuning into the dialogue after we get past our scientific rational mind that tells us to disregard the non-rational, the main reason we resist is because we are afraid of our shadow. The shadow is made up of parts of ourselves, both good and bad, that we don't know about and that we don't want to know about. Since we don't know about it, it obviously lives in the unconscious. But if we turn our face to the unconscious and engage in a dialogue with it, we will meet our shadow. But we really don't want to do that, like I said. And why not? Because we would then have to take responsibility for it and we would have to change. And the main thing to know about ego consciousness is that it really doesn't like to change. Change to the ego always feels like death. We can attribute this resistance of the ego to the limitation of consciousness. The ego simply doesn't have the big picture that the self would have. This is why we need a certain amount of faith to take the inner journey. We need it for our ego's sake, so that we can have the courage to face the unconscious and to meet the shadow and to undergo change after change that feels like death. So we've all had lots of dreams of symbolic deaths along the way, and I had a very memorable one several years back in which there's a dark-haired man and he's pointing a gun directly at me and I'm frozen in fear and I just know he's going to pull the trigger. But then suddenly a dream voice with very great authority tells me, "You must allow yourself to be continually swallowed by God." And then I woke up. So as you can imagine, that was a pretty powerful dream image and it stayed with me. But as I ponder that, as I ponder that later, I think that allowing oneself to be continually swallowed by God seems a very good metaphor for shadow integration. It's the willing sacrifice, dying to our old selves and allowing them to be swallowed up in order to allow a new life, a new self to emerge. And as the dream suggests, it must happen over and over again. This also reminds me of some lines from a lovely poem by Rilke. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. But we should also remember that our shadow contains golden parts as well. Unclaimed parts of ourselves that we have allowed to remain unexplored or projected out onto others whom we admire or idolize. Such projections are important tools of the capital S self because they can bring us to a greater self-awareness if we can recognize it as projection. These golden shadow images also show up in our dreams. Our job then becomes recognizing the projections, withdrawing them, and then claiming these gifts for ourselves. By doing so, we make conscious our unlived potential, our beauty, our unclaimed talents, our gold. So here we just have some examples of that. And this is what we were talking about here last week with the No Gurus Here handout. Okay. But even with its hidden golden parts, our ego's natural tendency is to avoid dialogue with the unconscious, to put up a resistance to it. We all have this resistance, even the most willing of us. And this resistance is a tricky thing because to some degree we have to put up with it because our ego needs to be able to move at its own pace and to take on change only when it's ready. But also, to some degree, we have to learn to recognize the symptoms of resistance and to call ourselves on it so we can push past it to the new life that awaits, the life on the other side of the next change. As we do the work of facing the unconscious, the connection between the ego and the self is strengthened and grows. It is a relationship by its very nature. And like any relationship, it appreciates attention and needs attention for growth. When the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious is successfully engaged, it is, symbolically speaking, the union of the opposites, or the union of the masculine consciousness and the feminine unconscious. The fruit of this union is individuation. Individuation is another Jungian term and an especially lovely and important concept. It is what we are attending to here in the Frankfurt Dream Group every week as we engage in inner work together. Individuation is not to be confused with individualism or the blatant pursuit of the ego-driven self-image for the purpose of making ourselves special. It is far from it. Individuation is the process of breaking out of the collective definition of ourselves, of putting down the collective measure, so to speak, and allowing ourselves to grow into the unique and particular human beings we were born to be. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This is the essence of individuation. But as beautiful as this sounds, in reality, it is never easy, nor is it particularly fun. It means breaking away from the herd and standing alone in the various solutions to one's life, the solutions that gradually appear from the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. This is done, keep in mind, with little validation from the outside, but almost exclusively from the inside. So you can see the difficulty of it. Later on, after your new life is in place, it does feel good. But when this new life is in the process of coming to birth, it can feel terrible and painful. And we all know that, after all, that is the inescapable reality of the birth process. Individuation means growing into wholeness. It means becoming the person you were meant to be, growing into your true self, and incarnating that true self more fully in your own being. It is an infinite possibility for growth, a process that continues throughout our lives. We're never finished. As we learn to follow wisdom's promptings and guidance, more closely, our lives naturally begin to have a more positive effect on the world around us, the ripple effect. And also, we likely will find that we feel more fulfilled and at peace. So far this all sounds rather abstract. Now we want to talk about how do we actually get this dialogue going with our unconscious selves. And the two primary ways in which the dialogue naturally takes place without much conscious effort on our part are through dreams and through synchronicity. Dreams, of course, come to us while we sleep, and synchronicity comes while we are awake. So let's look at synchronicity first for a moment. So the simplest definition of synchronicity is meaningful coincidence. Jung has called it an acausal connecting principle, but I think meaningful coincidence is easier. It is difficult for the modern rational mind to acknowledge its reality. Some of us are more tuned into it than others. Synchronicity goes on all the time, but is usually unnoticed. Most people have an experience with it around emotionally charged life events, such as at a death or while falling in love. Those are two times when it really kicks into high gear. And this is probably because these are two times when consciousness is shaken and kind of knocked back, when the veil between consciousness and the unconscious is especially thin. We're just more open at those times. Synchronicity makes meaning out of the coincidence of ordinary events. So say, for instance, you have a problem that you're mulling over and you happen to be walking by a bookshelf and a book falls off and falls at your feet. And when you pick it up, you see that this book is just what you need to help you with your problem. Or you get that unexpected phone call just at the right moment to give you some needed encouragement or timely information. Synchronicity assumes that life itself is a process of the divine. There is some other, larger than our individual selves, with whom the dialogue never stops. The trick with synchronicity is to give it the right weight in your life. Not too much and not too little. If you give it too much attention, it will make you crazy. But if you give it too little, you will miss its valuable guidance. So now let's turn to dreams, our nighttime dialogue with wisdom. Working with dreams is the richest practice with engaging with the flow of wisdom. It is the most complex and the most informative form of this dialogue. Our dreams never stop. They keep coming night after night. So again, our question becomes, how do we approach them? First of all, we have to remember them. And I think just turning your attention to them helps. Keeping a dream journal by your bed and jotting down key parts before you even head to the bathroom in the morning. Or we've had suggestions of just keeping pens and paper in the bathroom until you can, or using your voice recorder on your phone. There were a lot of good tips here last week about that very thing. Reading about dreams and the unconscious, or just joining a dream group, will likely get your dream life fired up. Taking the time to write down dreams is very important, because if you don't, you will likely lose many of the details or even the whole dream. After writing them down, we have to spend time looking at them from all angles. Circumambulating is a word I like. We have to spend time in reflection, noting where similar feelings or energies or situations present in the dream might be found in our waking life. There is a particular way to do this that works very well. It's called the image and association process, which Joyce is going to talk about here tonight after the break. And in that process, you take images from the dream and make associations with them. We'll also have some more practice in that realm next week. I believe we're going to do a dream mapping exercise with Joseph here. But for now, let's leave that step aside and look at some of the larger characteristics of dreams. So we can first say that dreams are truthful. They don't lie. Your interpretation might be off, but the dream itself speaks truly, if only you can understand it. Dreams come in the service of health and wholeness. They don't come to harm you or to mess you up. Even the scariest dream is trying to get your attention for good reason. Dreams are seldom literal. They are like parables, symbolic and metaphorical. We say that everything in the dream belongs to the dreamer. Your neighbor Sally in the dream is seldom your neighbor Sally. She is a part of you. So the question would be, what do I associate with Sally? If you listen to your answers, you will find that you might find out what part of you the dream is speaking of. Dreams don't come to tell you something you already know. If a dream is not telling you something new, you likely aren't interpreting it correctly. And dreams build on each other gradually. They gradually bring in new understanding, repeating certain themes over a long period of time. As you watch your dreams, the elements of the themes will gradually change. And so, for example, in one of my own dream themes a few years ago, over the course of this series of dreams, I have various interactions with male strangers. So these unknown masculine figures, they started out as very sinister serial killers when I first joined Dream Group. And then they gradually transformed, and I was having dreams about homeless men. And I was having more interaction with them. And then finally I started having dreams about engineering aides and then engineers, and they were all very helpful. So as my consciousness of my own my disowned masculine parts was growing, and as that part of me has been consciously integrated, the masculine dream element has been transformed from a threatening figure to a helpful one over time. You can actually see the progress of your own growing consciousness by noting the changes in the elements of a repeated theme like this. And one more thing to say about dreams in general. If you fail to understand a dream, that teaching will come again in a different way in a future dream. You don't have to worry about getting it right or wrong. If you misinterpret a dream, a future dream will come to correction. So in my opinion, the best way to work with dreams over a long period of time is to join a dream group. A dream group keeps you focused and on task because, for one thing, you're going to want to try to come up with at least one dream a week to bring to Dream Group. Without this community, it's easier to let your dream life slip away. And also, regular participation here in Dream Group hones your skills in interpreting your own dreams. The temenos, or container, in which we do this work is of great importance. Temenos is the Greek word that Jung used to describe a sacred, protected space in which an encounter with our unconscious can occur, allowing its contents to be brought safely to the light of consciousness. Here, we create our container through relationship and confidentiality, and with our opening and closing rituals that we do each week. We open our meetings by saying a canticle to wisdom as we prepare to search the depths of our dreams. And at the closing, we bring our focus back up to the light of consciousness with the reading of a canticle to the power of heaven. We feel that this helps provide the needed safe balance between consciousness and the unconscious in a symbolic but also a real way. So by becoming a part of our community Dream Group, you are joining what some have called the rising tide of the Dream Group movement. Here are a few of many examples of articles that have appeared in recent years documenting this rising Dream Group movement. There are over 200 dream groups that have been reported to be formed out of the Hayden Institute programs alone, and I'm going to tell you more about Hayden Institute in a minute. There are many more groups that meet in community centers and churches and Jung societies, in private homes, in prisons, and there are more forming all the time. Our own Joyce Hudson and Larry Mays have had significant parts to play in this movement. Joyce was involved in laying the groundwork for the emerging spiritually based dream group movement over 25 years ago. She talks about this in her book, but she had a personal crisis that sort of marked the end of the world as she knew it, and then stumbled upon the writings of Carl Jung. And she tells the story of how Jung gave her the tools that she needed to make sense of her new reality and to define and engage with the world that now had meaning beyond simple cause and effect. Joyce ended up sharing what she had learned by starting a dream group at her church in Athens, Georgia, and she facilitated that group for 17 years. And then she moved right here to Frankfurt and started this group in her living room. And we outgrew that and eventually landed here in our lovely home in the Light Clinic. So Joyce's influence grew even wider when she wrote and published a book in 2000 about her explorations of inner work and Jungian thought, and this is that book's cover. And then a few years ago, she revised that book and added some new material, and it was republished by Chiron Books. Here's the new book cover, and it features this beautiful painting by Dream Group member and Frankfurt artist Betty Bishore, which I just love. Joyce's book is a wonderful exploration of all we've touched on here today and more, and I would say it's a very good resource, and you should try to get your hands on a copy if you're new and you haven't read it. All right, and then while Joyce was getting all of her stuff going, Larry Mays, who's also a member of Dream Group here, but not here tonight, he was meanwhile over in Little Rock, Arkansas, laying other groundwork for this type of inner work. In his role as the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Arkansas, he ordained Susan Sims Smith as the canon for special ministries, which basically meant that she traveled around the state starting dream groups and churches, and she was teaching deep meditation and Jungian concepts for inner work. And she was often using Joyce's book as her teaching tool in that process. Then Larry and Susan also traveled together teaching on dream work and on masculine and feminine energies and other Jungian topics. And it was a priority ministry for the 13 years he was bishop there. And through that work, he helped to establish over 20 new dream groups around Arkansas. And so now Larry and Joyce continue to travel some and teach on these inner work topics in their retirement. So around the same time that Joyce was getting her dream group started in Georgia, there was Bob Hayden over in North Carolina, and he was an Episcopal priest who felt a nudge to begin a program of study for spiritually focused dream work. So he founded the Hayden Institute in 1994, and it offers 2-year programs in both dreamwork training and spiritual direction training. And I've done both of those programs, and we now have 5 other people from the Frankfurt Dream Group who have graduated from the Dreamwork training program. That would be Joseph and David McElrath and Judy Hellman, and also Jan and Ken Cottrell. And Mary Frank and Emmeline are there now and about to graduate, so we'll soon have 7. Yeah. So you can see we like it. Then in 2003, the Hayden Institute started the Summer Dream and Spirituality Conference, and it's held each year at the end of May in a beautiful setting at Canoga in the mountains near Hendersonville, North Carolina. The Summer Dream Conference really has become the hub for the spiritually focused dream work at this time. It attracts diverse and talented faculty and about 250 participants a year. And a sizable number of us from the Frankfurt Dream Group do go every year, and we always find it to be an amazing and transformative week. So let me emphasize here again that the group dreamwork process is different from working with dreams on your own. When you have a dream worked in a dream group, other people are projecting their associations onto your dream. And when you work with your dreams individually, you are making your own associations with the images. So for those of you who didn't hear this last week, in group dream work, those who want to share a dream at the beginning of the meeting each week. Then after breaking into smaller groups, if our numbers are large enough, we pick a dream or two to work on in greater depth. The dreamer listens as the other group members use a projective process in which we say, in my dream, or if it were my dream, and then group members make their own associations with the images found in the dream that was shared. We don't ask for personal associations of the dreamer so as not to probe too deeply into their personal lives. But these associations that the other dream group members make often do give the dreamer aha moments, which help them interpret the dreams for themselves. Only the dreamer can decide what a dream means for her or him in the end, but this projective process can really help. We also find that we learn from and get meaning from the other people's dreams. It's really amazing that are shared in Dream Group. It is amazing to watch the lives of Dream Group members unfold and expand over time, and it's also amazing to see how the group grows together as well. So, what I've put forth here tonight is not meant to imply that everyone should follow a Dreamwork path. Not everyone is called to this work. There are many other meaningful and effective spiritual practices and other valid paths to consciousness. And here's that old tree of contemplative practices image I like to use, which graphically depicts some of the many ways we connect with our authentic selves in our lives today. And I am still looking for a graphic that includes Dreamwork, to no avail yet, but I still like this visual. Maybe we'll just have to make one. But if you do feel the pull to engage with the flow of life through a conscious Dreamwork practice, I and many others here in this group can testify that the work you do with your dreams will expand, improve, and enrich your life in ways not even imagined before. We got a glimpse of this from the testimonials given here last week. Many of us believe that this work can also have a healing effect on the larger world. As more of us recognize and take responsibility for our own shadows, as we make friends with it, then our projections of unclaimed darkness are withdrawn from the outer world. Owning our darkness and getting to know it so it can be transformed, it no longer gets pushed out onto the outer world where it has often devolved and becomes hurtful or even turning into harmful acts directed toward our family, our neighbors, and our natural environment. And that was the devolved slide. But as we learn to love the inner enemy, we have a chance of loving and redeeming the outer one. And really imagine what healing implications this could hold for the world. Likewise, when we claim our golden shadows, we bring more imagination, creativity, and fresh points of view into consciousness, which can help solve problems. Dreams are pathways to allowing our full genius, both individual and collective, to emerge. So, I've shared here today a view of the world that recognizes wisdom, this natural flow of life, as an interpenetrating and influencing force acting on the physical world in an unending stream. It is a view that encourages us to take our dreams seriously and to pay more attention to our synchronicities and to use them as potent tools that move us toward healing and wholeness. You'll find a lot of support for your journey here in our dream group as we share and ponder and laugh and learn and are awed together. So I'm going to close again with a poem by Derek Walcott because I haven't read it since last year and I just love it. And I think the words beautifully capture the essence of this inner journey, should we choose to take it. It's called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. Thank you.